YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my April 2025 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. I'm going to start with the nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. Also, I put chapter markers in all of my videos, so if you need to skip over anything or go back to anything, all of that is listed down below. On the way down to the description to check things out, make sure that you're subscribed because sometimes YouTube likes to unsubscribe people, and maybe hit that like button while you're at it. As a reminder, I will also be updating my bingo board from hell as well as telling you what I read for the Read Queer All Year prompts for April. All of that is going to be at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. In April, I read 14 things and DNF'd one thing for a total of 3,641 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so about 1,464 of those pages were actually about 38 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 11 adult books, 3 YA books, and 1 middle grade book. I read 9 novels, 3 anthologies, 2 novellas, and 1 graphic novel. This month, the biggest chunk of what I read was nonfiction, followed by mystery thriller, contemporary, fantasy, science fiction, and historical fiction. If you adjust by page count, not too much changes. Most of these were from the library, but I did read 1 from an independent bookstore, 1 from a bookstore chain, 1 from Book of the Month, a free book, and something I already owned. I read 6 audiobooks, 5 hardcovers, 3 paperbacks, and 1 ebook. The biggest chunk of my books were in the 200 to 399 page range, and the majority were published this decade. I had a decent mix of authors in terms of gender, and over half of the protagonists were women. In terms of setting, nearly half of these were set in the US, a big chunk of the rest were in other worlds, but I also had reads set in Canada and the United Kingdom. In terms of diversity of subject matter, most of these were intersectional, with some additional queer books, books to do with race and religion, and a couple that had no diversity to speak of. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 1 0-star rating, which is how I track my DNFs, 1 2.5-star read, 2 3.5-star reads, 5 4-star reads, 1 4.5-star read, and 5 5-star reads. Let's start with the lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? Let's try going this way this time. I don't have a viewfinder, so this could be dangerous and disastrous. We'll find out. As for the DNF this month, that was Values by Mark Carney. This is a book I actually put on hold as soon as I saw him talking to Jon Stewart on whichever program he's on right now. And this was before he made his bid to become the leader of the Liberal Party, and now, as of a few days ago, he's officially our Prime Minister. I mean, he was technically our Prime Minister for a little while previous to that, but we just had an election. He is definitely the Prime Minister right now. This is definitely a soft DNF because I was really interested in what I was reading and this kind of juxtaposition between value as in money and monetary basis and values as in the values one has in one's life. However, when this came in as a whole, I just didn't have the mental bandwidth to actually do this 21-hour audiobook. On this topic, I definitely want to know more about, which is economics, but I definitely didn't have the brain power for it at the time, so I had to put it on to the next person in the queue. My 2.5-star book this month was Of Books and Paper Dragons. This one is set in a world other than our own, and our main characters are a dragon, an orc, and a creature that's made out of rock. I can't remember if this type of creature had a name. It probably did, but I've forgotten it. And this book is all about the orc wanting to settle down after decades of service of going out and finding different things for the dragon's hoard, and the orc wants to open a bookstore. The rock-type person wants a little bit of change of scenery and decides to help with this endeavor, and the dragon also ends up helping as well. And it becomes this whole discussion of friendship and asexuality and different cute, cozy vibes. This wasn't terrible, but there were certain parts of the writing where I was just like, you didn't need to describe it that way. You didn't need to go out of your way to try to not use a word, especially considering this world has all of these things that our world has, and you can just call it a spoon. The one other thing that really annoyed me is every time we were in the perspective of the dragon, they would be talking about the other characters and calling them humans, and I'm like, but they're not humans, so why are you calling them humans? It didn't make any sense to me. However, if you really like a book for the vibes, this is probably one you'll enjoy. On to my 3.5-star reads, the first one being Finding Baby Holly. This is a nonfiction book, and it starts out with this woman named Holly who is just going about her business. She's like 42 years old. She's doing all of the prep work to kind of get things together for opening of the cafe that she works in, or the restaurant, or whatever it is. And this was actually in the early early 2020s, so I don't even think the cafe itself was open, but they were putting together meals for pickup orders and that type of thing, when all of a sudden these law enforcement people show up to her work and they were like, hey, we need to talk to you because it turns out you've been missing for like 40 years and you didn't know about it. From there we go on to learn about her family, her upbringing, how her birth parents actually died a really long time ago and that case is still unsolved, and how her family's been tirelessly looking for baby Holly because she's been missing as long as her parents were missing, but she didn't die like her parents did. It is a truly fascinating story because obviously we tend to think the worst when it's like, well, the parents are found dead, so the baby probably also disposed of, maybe even was also in the same place they were found, which was very, very rural, but like there could have been animal predation going on, so like you never know. But no, it turns out that she found her birth family and was able to connect with them, which is kind of cool. My other 3.5 star read is Murder by Memory. This is a very short novella and it's taking place on a generation ship. Essentially, once your body tends to wear out, you've uploaded all of your memories to a memory book on this ship, and then over the next 2 days, a new body is made for you, and your consciousness from this memory book is put into this new body, and you kind of just keep living your life out like that until you need a new body eventually. However, what happens if somebody starts deleting people's memory books? That's exactly the problem that our ship's detective comes across, because she comes back into consciousness in a body that is not her own, and has to figure out why and what she's doing there. This is a start to a series, and I found the premise really, really interesting, so I'd be excited to see where it goes from here. On to my 4-star reads, the first one being a graphic novel called I Felt Myself Slipping. This one is about these two characters who are into gymnastics. One of them has been on the same team for quite some time, and the other one has just recently moved to the area and is now on the team. However, that character is deaf and usually uses hearing aids, but not during practice, because obviously you have the problem of them like flying out while you're flying through the air and that type of thing. One of them has a crush on the other. She definitely learns some sign language so they can connect with each other, and they also end up writing in these notebooks back and forth to each other, which is actually something that her parents did when they were getting to know each other, because her father's English wasn't really great when he met her father, and they were kind of learning about each other this way, which is just so fun that she brought it into this relationship. This is just such a great graphic novel and has a bunch of different types of representation in it, and I really enjoyed it. Next we have Watch Out for Her. This one is interesting because you get two different perspectives. One is the mother of a small child. He is about 5, I think, at this point, and basically they want a babysitter over the summer because she hasn't been able to really do anything for herself for quite some time because of motherhood. And prior to motherhood, she actually was really into photography and she's wanting to get back into that. The other perspective is this girl who I believe is about 18 or 19 years old, and she actually ends up being the babysitter for this young boy. This boy absolutely worships his babysitter, thinks she's the greatest person in the world. However, both of these women are doing things they probably shouldn't be doing, and we have two different timelines. The beginning of the summer when everybody's kind of meeting each other, and that's when we're getting the perspective of the babysitter, and the second timeline is the perspective from the mother, and it's at the end of the summer. They've actually completely moved provinces at this point, and you know that something bad happened with the babysitter, but you don't really know what it was. From there, you're getting these stories back and forth, and you're trying to figure out what happened in this situation, and if there are weird things happening now in this completely different city, why are they happening? It was a fun mystery thriller. It kind of kept me wanting to know what was going on, and that's its whole job, and it did that. Another mystery thriller that I read this month is Every Sweet Thing is Bitter. This one is about this woman who hasn't been back to her hometown in a very long time, because the last time she was there, she actually hit her mother with their family car and went away to jail for this. Her mother's basically been like, we don't want anything to do with you, don't contact your sisters. She definitely doesn't want to contact her dad, because her dad was actually the person she was trying to hit with the car, because he was actually attacking her mother. However, when the police got there, nobody would take her side in this story. It is a very small town, and as it turns out, the chief of police there is under the thumb of her father. So every time he used to come to their house for a domestic dispute and had to like suture up wounds, he just never made any reports about it, which is just absolutely terrible. However, our main character is forced into going back for the first time in 13 years because her mother has gone missing. And obviously we're trying to figure out what happened and if she's still alive out there or if something else has happened to her. This is one of those books that is just so incredibly messy and detailed, and I can definitely recommend it if you like any of those types of things. Next on this list, we're going back to some nonfiction, and that's the Anti-Ableist Manifesto. This is a book talking about different facets of things one can do in their life to be anti-ableist. Often when I read books like this, I find myself feeling like they're geared towards people who are like in companies and can change policies and that type of thing. But I had this light bulb moment this time while I was reading this one, because as it turns out, I am on the board of a theater society, and I have the ability to put together a best practices when it comes to accessibility document, which is exactly something I did, and I brought it to the board and went, hey, this isn't a document saying this is everything that you could possibly ever do to do with anyone that has any possible disability, but it's just some best practices. And then in the future, if there are people that have certain needs, we will address them on a one-on-one basis. Much like that document, this book isn't trying to tell you what to do in every circumstance with everyone who has a disability, because everybody is different. As the saying goes, if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. But I'm glad that I could take things directly from this book and implement them in my own small way. Finally, for this category, we have The River Has Roots. Firstly, I'd like to say if you have the ability to listen to the audiobook, I would definitely recommend that experience, especially if you like audiobooks that have sound effects and singing in this one, because this is one of those, and it's just absolutely lovely. This book is primarily about these two sisters who live on this really large estate with their family, and it's next to these woods as well as this river, and all of this area has a lot of magic to it. In this world, magic is called grammar, and the way you talk about things can actually change the course of your entire life. This is very short, so I don't want to give too much away, but you can definitely tell that the author is a huge word nerd and a lover of language, and that really bleeds through into this text in the most delightful of ways. There are some lovely turns of phrase in here and secondary meanings for different words, and it's just an absolute delight. On to my 4.5 star read, and that's Sipping Dom Perignon Through a Straw. This one is a memoir by Eddie Ndopu about his time growing up as well as attending Oxford, which was quite the feat because not only did he have to raise a bunch of money to actually have a carer while he was at Oxford, which honestly he shouldn't have had to do because Oxford has money, but this also goes through his experiences as being a queer black man growing up with a degenerative muscle disorder and these different relationships he finds himself in, be them with family members or care aides or friends. And honestly, this is just one of those books where you need to experience it through Eddie. You do not need me to tell you everything that happened in his life because I'm not going to do a great job, whereas Eddie does a fantastic job. Definitely recommend picking this one up. On to my 5-star reads, the first of which is a reread. I like to put my rereads at the beginning of this category, which means that other books have the chance to be my favorite book for that month that I haven't read previous to this month, if that makes any sense to anyone other than me. And that was a reread of Queens of Geek by Jen Wilde. This is something I read for the first time back in 2017, absolutely loved it then, and it was so fun to revisit now. This book is about 3 friends who live in Australia but are actually going to their first fan convention in Los Angeles, and one of them is going because she was actually the lead in an independent movie that is being picked up, so she has a bunch of panels and those types of things that she needs to do while she's there, and then her 2 best friends have basically tagged along so they can go to the event itself. We get the perspectives of 2 out of 3 of them. Charlie is our actress, Taylor is really there to see her favorite author ever, and she's always been a little bit in love with Jamie, who is also there. And let me tell you, shenanigans ensue. This is a very intense weekend for everybody involved, and it's just so delightful. This is my first book I ever read by Jen Wilde, and I have adored all of their work since then, including, as I always like to say when I'm talking about Jen Wilde, this piece of art, which Jen drew of me. Next on this list we have The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School. This one is so well done, so well written. I was on the edge of my seat just wanting to know what was going to go on with these characters. Our main character in this one is a girl who is freshly about to go to Catholic school for the first time with her younger brother Caesar, who is actually kind of a genius, so they're in the same grade even though they're not the same age, and she's basically there to look out for him and make sure that everything's okay because he's had some problems with fighting at their old school. Not to mention she doesn't really want to go to her old school because her old best friend, who she also had feelings for, goes to that school and basically outed her to their entire friend group when she found out that she kind of likes her, and obviously that was not reciprocated and it was a whole mess. So she doesn't want to be there anyway. She's fine with going to this Catholic school and she's fine with just kind of staying in the closet, making sure nobody knows about her, and definitely not coming out to her parents because she knows there's a really good chance that she'll end up on the streets, and she needs to save up some money before that can happen. Her family situation is a little bit unfortunate in that she and her brother live with her mother, and her dad was actually deported back to Mexico, so although they talk every once in a while, he doesn't live in the family home. And it's really tough for her because she was always closer to her dad than she was to her mom, and her mom always seems to basically make her the second parent in the situation, which kind of sucks because sometimes things should be about her and not just always about her little brother. This book is just fantastically written. I cannot believe that this started out as a NaNoWriMo NaNoWriMo project, and then obviously was revised before it became this book, and it's just so good. The final fiction book on this list is The Last Quintista. This is all about storytelling, and it is just so phenomenally put together. I absolutely loved so much of my reading this month, can you tell? This is a book about a girl who's about 11 years old when we meet her, and she really has this fascination with stories and storytelling, and she gets that from her grandmother. However, her parents are more science people, so one of them is into botany, the other's into geology, and they really want her to follow in their footsteps, especially because all of them are about to be loaded onto a generation ship. Pretty much what's going to happen is her parents, her and her little brother, are going to go into stasis, and in hundreds of years they're going to wake up and set up a new society. And while she's in stasis, she's supposed to basically get all this information downloaded into her brain. However, absolutely nothing goes particularly to plan, and she finds herself waking up in this situation that is very different from the situation that they were supposed to have when they came out of stasis. And she finds herself having to save a civilization through storytelling, which is just so good. I don't want to tell you any more than that, I just want you to go read it. How many times have I said that throughout this video? Penultimately on this list, we have Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. This is a book about tuberculosis. Not only is it the world's most infectious, deadly disease that we have a cure for, and for some reason millions of people still die from it every year, but also some anecdotal information about tuberculosis when it comes down to being the reason why certain things were invented, or the catalyst into certain places getting statehood, for example. If you follow John Green online, or at least if you followed him in the last 5 years, you know that this is a passion project for him. He actually met somebody named Henry who has tuberculosis while he was on a hospital visit, and from there they've kept up this friendship, and he's learned so much from Henry himself as a person with tuberculosis. But then he's also done all this other research, and he's working really tirelessly with Partners in Health and other organizations to kind of get the word out there and make sure that more people don't suffer from this disease that they do not have to suffer from. We have a cure. We've had a cure for ages, and most people, if you were to tell them about tuberculosis, they'd be like, oh yeah, that thing that people used to die from like 100 years ago. Turns out people still do. Largely to do with poverty, inequality, and racism. The final book that I need to talk about is another book that you just need to read for yourself, and that is Genocide Bad. This one is by Sim Kern, and it's talking about Palestine, Jewish history, and collective liberation. This is a series of, I believe, 10 essays, as well as a bit of a memoir section to basically talk about why they are the person talking about this, which really comes down to a couple of things. One, they're willing to. Two, they have a bunch of background information because they've actually been studying this information for a while. And three, because they had a lot of TikToks on the subject that went viral to the point where the only Palestinian-owned publishing house in the United States reached out to them and said, hey, can you write this into a book so we can publish it? So they did, and they did a phenomenal job, and you should read this book. If you're anything like me, you could go into something like this and you know for a fact that things like genocide are pretty bad. They're not things that you should want to have happen in the world. But on the flip side, I've always had this feeling of I don't know enough about this history to actually really talk about it, which is basically a tactic to get people to not talk about it and not engage with the fact that there should not be genocides going on in the world, and yet there are. Obviously, this book talks about more in depth than I am able to do, so I highly recommend reading it, but it really just boils down to Genocide Bad. It's just that simple. As for the prompts for Read Queer All Year, these were the prompts for April, and I was able to tick off every single one of these. For Asexuality Rep, I read Of Books and Paper Dragons. For Pink Cover, I read Queens of Geek. For Travel, I read Sipping Dom Perignon Through a Straw. And for Lesbian Rep, I read Murder by Memory. As for the Bookish Bingo board from Hell, this is what my board looks like. I'm still pretty far away from being able to check off any of these prompts, let alone get a bingo, but I'm trucking along. Just to let you know how this changed from last month, I added one more banned book to this. I participated in the Disability Readathon, bringing my readathons up to 2. I did one reread, that was Queens of Geek. I read a second BookBox book, which is great, except for I also ordered 3 books this month from Book of the Month, so that ratio is not where I want it to be, so I'm going to have to work on that. And those are the updates, so let's see how I do in this next month. Hopefully I can tick off a few more things. If you want to hear me talk more about these books, or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always linked down below. If you've read any of these, or you now want to read any of these, please let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment, but want to make sure that I know you're here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!